Have you ever felt that tiny prick in your gut? The kind that whispers you're missing something even when everything seems right? That sensation of unease, a whisper in the back of your mind, telling you to look closer. If so, you're not alone. Because what many women and men fail to realize is that the first signs of betrayal, especially emotional betrayal, are rarely spoken aloud or shown outright. Instead, they leave behind silent, invisible clues that Carl Jung once described with profound insight. An unfaithful man always leaves these signs. Imagine a relationship that once felt full of passion, connection, and trust. Now behind the scenes, something's shifted. You notice the small cracks, the coldness in their eyes, the hurried replies, the distracted glances at their phone, the absence of tenderness. These aren't just signs of being busy or stressed, they are signals of something much deeper. Jung believed that the human psyche is constantly trying to communicate with us through symbols, shadows, and subtle cues. The question is, are we listening? You see, emotional infidelity doesn't always look like a physical affair. It begins subtly, quietly, almost imperceptibly. It's rooted in the disconnection of the soul. When someone stops investing emotionally, when they begin to become distant, indifferent, or unresponsive, those are the signs that their inner world is starting to break down. And those signs are never random. They are deliberate clues, left behind as a map to what's happening beneath the surface. Why do people betray? Jung argued that much of human behavior is driven by unconscious motives, by shadows that we refuse to face. The shadow is everything we hide, repress, or deny about ourselves. And when a man or a woman suppresses their feelings of dissatisfaction, boredom, or emptiness, they unconsciously project those feelings outward. Instead of confronting their inner discontent, they seek validation elsewhere, lingering in emotional affairs, secret conversations, or distant gestures. And as women, we often sense these signals first. The subtle shifts in energy, the feeling that we are no longer the object of their complete attention. It's a gut feeling, an instinct, that tells us something's off. But because these signs are so subtle, they are easy to dismiss or rationalize. He's just stressed, we tell ourselves. He's tired. But deep down, we know better. We recognize that these signals are not coincidence. They are the first silent signs that your partner's emotional fidelity is being compromised. Carl Jung's concept of the shadow helps us understand why these signs are left behind. When someone refuses to face their inner dissatisfaction, they unconsciously seek escapism through other people or activities. They stop choosing you every day. They begin to act as if you are invisible. They withdraw emotionally, and their demeanor becomes a mask hiding the truth. The signs are there, if you look closely. There's an entire language of the body and soul that speaks louder than words. When he stops sharing his thoughts, avoids eye contact, or becomes overly defensive when you ask questions, those are signals that something is broken inside him. When his laughter grows hollow, his response is robotic, and his interest in your life diminishes. They are leaves on a tree, signaling decay beneath the surface. Jung taught us that these signs often get ignored because we don't want to see the truth. Because facing betrayal, especially emotional betrayal, is painful. It forces us to confront our deepest fears about ourselves, our worth, and our relationships. But remaining blind doesn't protect us. It deepens the wound, allowing the disconnection to grow until it becomes irreparable. So, what are these signs? Exactly. How can you distinguish between normal relationship ups and downs and the early symptoms of emotional betrayal? That's what I want us to explore today. Because recognizing these signals is the first step toward inner liberation. The first step to reclaim your power and your peace. And remember, your intuition is your most accurate compass. When it whispers that something isn't right, trust it. Because, as Jung said, the unconscious speaks in symbols and signs. Are you listening? If you're feeling that inner voice right now, if your gut keeps hinting at something hidden, stay tuned. Over the next few minutes, I'll guide you through the most subtle, yet most profound signs of emotional betrayal. Signs that often go unnoticed, but are always there. Because understanding these clues allows you to see the truth beneath the illusion, giving you the power to choose what's best for your heart. And before we continue, I want to invite you to subscribe to this channel. If you find value in understanding the psychological truths behind love, betrayal, and self-discovery, hit that subscribe button. Like this video if it resonates with you, and leave a comment sharing your experience or questions. Because no woman should walk her journey alone. This community is here to empower you. Now let's dive deeper. Imagine for a moment an invisible universe that your eyes cannot see but your soul innately perceives. This is the essence of emotional betrayal. It leaves subtle, almost imperceptible clues that reveal a disconnection far deeper than words alone can express. These signals are the breadcrumb trails, the secret language of the subconscious telling us that the soul has drifted away, that the mind has retreated, and that the heart has begun to grow cold. When we understand Jungian psychology, we realize that these signs don't simply appear out of nowhere. They are the result of internal processes that slowly build up beneath our awareness. The disconnection is often gradual, a slow decay that starts from within. Think of a tree. Its leaves might slowly turn yellow and fall before the entire tree begins to die. You might not notice the change immediately, but your intuition, your deepest self, perceives these alterations long before your rational mind catches up. One of the most profound signs of emotional betrayal is inner detachment, a kind of silent withdrawal of the soul. You notice him perhaps still sitting beside you, sharing a life, yet feeling as if a distance separates you, a gap you cannot quite name. Conversations that once flowed effortlessly now feel strained or superficial. The vulnerability that once fueled your connection fades. Instead, he becomes more guarded, more distant. His responses are no longer infused with enthusiasm or genuine interest. Instead, they're mechanical, automatic, and devoid of feeling. This emotional distancing is often a reflection of what Jung called the shadow, the unconscious part of ourselves we deny and refuse to face. When someone suppresses their dissatisfaction, their boredom, or their dissatisfaction, these shadows grow and seethe beneath the surface, manifesting through disinterest, indifference, or avoidance. They're unacknowledged parts of the individual's psyche, parts that seek expression, destruction, or escape. That's why, in relationships, these shifts are signaled by very subtle cues. The attention that once complemented your love story begins to fade. No longer does he ask how your day was or truly listen to your concerns. Instead, responses become curt, distracted, or distractedly polite. It's as if his mind is parked elsewhere, dreaming of freedom or escape, an internal conversation that no longer includes you. Now let's consider the metaphor of the shadow in Jung's psychology. The shadow is what we deny within ourselves, our fears, our insecurities, our dissatisfaction. When a person avoids facing these aspects, they inevitably project these denied parts outward. In love, this projection manifests as distancing, coldness, or emotional absences. When someone refuses to confront their inner chaos, their shadow begins to take control, quietly pulling them away from their authentic self and, ultimately, their partner. Closely related is the alteration in physical intimacy. You might notice that sex becomes emotionally disconnected, no longer shared with vulnerability, but rather as a transactional act that feels hollow. Sometimes it becomes overly passionate or frantic, almost as if trying to compensate for the underlying emptiness. Other times it's cold, mechanical, and devoid of tenderness. These extremes are symptomatic of a soul that's either desperately trying to mask its inner pain or has lost contact with the emotional core of love. Another subtle but revealing sign to look for involves behavioral changes regarding communication in the digital realm. Once, your partner might have been open, leaving their phone unlocked, sharing messages joyfully, showing you their social media. Now, the messages are hidden, the phone is kept close, passwords are changed, and any innocent question is met with defensiveness or anger. This is often a subconscious confession, hiding the truth because the unconscious mind recognizes that the betrayal, whether emotional or physical, is already underway. The digital secrecy becomes a symbol of the internal rupture. It's a form of self-protection, but also a sign of emotional withdrawal, rooted in the fear of being caught. Though what's really happening inside is much deeper. Jung emphasized that repression and denial create shadows that find ways to manifest in our behaviors. And secrecy, in this case, acts as the ultimate surface symptom of a deep internal conflict. Consider also the transformation in shared dreams and future plans. Once, your partner eagerly discussed future adventures, shared goals, and visions of life together. Over time, these conversations dwindle or turn into vague, distant ideas, if they happen at all. Shared visions become individual pursuits, and their plans start to exclude you. This is a silent betrayal, an internal shift where the emotional investment, once mutual, evaporates. Why does this happen? Because beneath the surface, the spirit is withdrawing from the relationship, retreating into the shadow of its own dissatisfaction. Jung believed that when individuals refuse to face their true feelings, they unconsciously begin a process of internal fragmentation, splitting off parts of themselves they find intolerable. The consequence? They seek external solace, an affair, an emotional connection elsewhere. And the more they deny within, the more they disconnect without. As women, our intuition often perceives this shift long before the conscious mind does. The gut feeling intensifies, and subtle clues become whispers, shadows of the relationship that reveal the disconnection beneath the facade. The hollow laughter, the emotional unavailability, the rapid digital detox, or the sudden avoidance of vulnerability all become markers leading toward the inevitable. And these signs are not random. They are messages from the unconscious, trying to warn us that the internal shadow has taken root. When ignored, the shadow grows stronger, and the disconnection becomes an abyss. When recognized, these signs can serve as catalysts for awareness, self-renewal, or decisive change. Understanding Jung's theory of the shadow helps us decode these signals. When a man represses his dissatisfaction, he inwardly battles his own darkness, his fears, insecurities, and boredom. Instead of confronting these parts within, he projects them outward, sometimes into his partner, other times into secret behaviors. The betrayal begins within the psyche, long before it manifests externally. What can you do with this awareness? First, listen to what your intuition is telling you. Notice the subtle shifts, the way his gaze feels colder, how his responses lack depth, or how his presence feels more distant. Don't wait until the physical act of betrayal occurs. Often, emotional disconnection is already a betrayal in itself, one that leaves no visible scars but wounds the soul deeply. This recognition demands courage, the courage to look beyond the obvious, to see the shadows cast beneath the surface. When you do, you regain your power, not in anger or blame, but in clarity. You see the patterns, the signs, and the truths that your soul has been whispering all along, and you start walking toward authentic understanding. Knowing these signs is an act of love to yourself, because the moment you see an emotional disconnect for what it truly is, you stop blaming yourself or romanticizing the relationship. You start accepting the reality that a love built on shadows and denial cannot survive. And that realization, while painful, is profoundly liberating. Acceptance is the first step toward reclaiming your sovereignty. When you recognize these signs, you choose whether to continue in the illusion or to wake up and walk toward your highest truth. Because the truth is, the shadow can only thrive when we deny it. But once we shine our inner light on it, we free ourselves from its grip. Keep this always in mind. The signals from the shadows are not enemies, they are messengers. They demand our attention so that we may grow, heal, and evolve into a more authentic version of ourselves. The moment we listen, we rediscover our inner compass, our true guiding star, and that is the path to genuine wholeness. Imagine standing in a dark room with only a faint light guiding your way. Every step feels uncertain, yet your inner voice whispers that you've been here before, that deep inside you've sensed something was wrong even in the brightest moments. That voice is your intuition, and it's always been your most faithful guide. But, over time, silence, doubt, and the denial of these subtle signs can slowly drown it out, leaving you lost in a fog of confusion and pain. This is the moment of awakening, the point where finally you begin to see the truth that has been lingering beneath the surface. The truth that, as Carl Jung rightly said, an unfaithful man always leaves these signs. Not just signs of physical infidelity, but the silent emotional disconnection that gradually erodes the foundation of love. Many women, consciously or unconsciously, ignore these signs because facing them confronts us with our deepest fears. Is my love enough? Have I been enough? Could I have done something different? These questions echo in our minds because, as Jung explained, the human soul prefers internal chaos to the nightmare of true self-awareness. The shadow, the repressed parts of ourselves, resurface whenever we refuse to confront the reality of betrayal in its many subtle guises. But the truth is, betrayal doesn't always shout. It calls softly, through the coldness in his eyes, the avoidance of meaningful conversation, the absence of tenderness, even in moments that once felt sacred. It whispers in the little gestures, the hurried reply to your text, the distracted gaze, the emotional withdrawal masked as routine. These may seem insignificant, just busy days, stress, tiredness. But those clues are the breadcrumbs left behind. Puzzles meant to be deciphered, signals that your soul resonates with when you're truly awake. And the more you ignore those signs, the deeper the disconnect becomes. The bond, a delicate ecosystem of shared energy, trust, and love, begins to crack. Jung's concept of the shadow teaches us that what we deny within ourselves manifests outwardly, often in ways that betray our conscious awareness. When a man refuses to face his inner emptiness, he unconsciously projects it onto his partner. That projection surfaces as emotional indifference, a slow erosion of sensitivity, of interest, of presence. This isn't always deliberate. Sometimes it's the unconscious, desperate attempt to stay numb, to anesthetize his own pain, boredom, or dissatisfaction with fleeting escapes, whether through social media, secret conversations, or emotional affairs. Each secret, every guarded glance at the phone, and every fleeting excuse to avoid intimacy is a clue that the shadow has taken hold. And as women, we often sense these shifts first, the gentle feeling that your partner is not really there anymore, no matter how much you try to hold on. That faint but persistent whisper that something is missing. It's not paranoia. It's an innate internal compass that, when tuned in, alerts you to the growing dissonance. Jung believed that ignoring this inner voice is what allows shadows within ourselves and others to flourish unnoticed until much damage has been done. Let's explore some of these signs more deeply, those that often go unnoticed yet reveal so much about the state of your relationship. One of the most insidious signs is disconnection in intimacy. When the sexual connection becomes mechanical or oddly intense, it's a sign that energy is being displaced elsewhere. Too mechanical, sex is no longer about connection, but routine. Too intense, perhaps it's an unconscious attempt to fill an emotional void, a way to cover up the silent pain of emotional absence. Both extremes betray a fractured inner world, because sex is never just physical. It's the purest expression of emotional connection. And when that connection dissolves, the physical becomes hollow, meaningless. Another subtle yet powerful sign is the sense of emotional avoidance. You notice that he no longer shares his thoughts or feelings the way he once did. Conversations are shallow, and when you try to dive deeper, he evades or changes the subject. When he withdraws, he erects an invisible barrier. It's as if his soul has retreated, hiding behind screens, excuses, and distractions. This detachment isn't just about fatigue or stress. It's about the shadow taking over, the part of him that refuses vulnerability, that fears facing his own dissatisfaction. The idea of the shadow in Jungian psychology is fundamental here. What we deny in ourselves, we tend to project outward. In betrayal, this projection manifests as emotional withdrawal and disinterest. When a man avoids confronting his own dissatisfaction, he seeks solace in illusions. Affairs of the mind or the body, but none will fully satisfy what he denies within. Then we come to digital secrecy. Once, the phone was open. Now, it's guarded. He quickly dismisses questions about messages or responds defensively, accusing you of paranoia. But this defensiveness is the confession in disguise. When there's nothing to hide, there's no need for concealment. And the increased secrecy signals that he is secretly distancing himself, engaging in an internal policy of concealment, a key sign of emotional infidelity. The deterioration of trust begins here, but it's rooted in more than just physical indiscretions. It's rooted in the breaking of emotional honesty, the real bond that keeps us connected. Jung's ideas suggest that these signs are merely symptoms of an internal conflict, a soul at war with itself, which inevitably spills over into the external world. Now let's talk about the shifting patterns of communication. Basants, your partner eagerly sought out your company, loved to share, and was genuinely curious about your inner world. Now, responses are curt, delayed, or emotionally flat. Humor is gone, spontaneity is replaced by routine. Even in shared moments, he seems absent, lost in his thoughts or somewhere else entirely. This emotional detachment isn't accidental, but signals that his internal world is no longer aligned with yours. You might find yourself asking, when did I become an outsider in my own relationship? When did his presence shift from an active participation to a passive observer? This internal disconnection reflects the gradual shift of his soul away from the partnership. A slow process Jung would call the loss of the authentic self, hidden behind projections and denial. Finally, the most profound sign, yet perhaps the most difficult to accept, is the diminishing of shared dreams and future plans. As Jung pointed out, true love involves union not only of bodies, but of souls and visions. When those shared hopes fade, replaced by silence, apathy, or divergence, a silent betrayal is taking hold. You start to realize that the future you envision together no longer documents his part. His plans are now solitary, and you are suddenly excluded. But understanding these signs is only the beginning. The real challenge is listening to your inner voice and trusting it enough to act. Because once you recognize that these signals are not just coincidences but the language of an unconscious shadow, you will reclaim your power. In doing so, you confront the most sacred part of yourself, the part that refuses to accept betrayal, that longs for authenticity, and that desires love rooted in truth. That part of you, the soul, knows when it has been betrayed. It feels the coldness, the absence, the silence, long before the words or actions betray the truth. If you've resonated with any of this, it's time to remember. Trusting your intuition is an act of love for yourself. You've already felt the disconnection, the emptiness, the silence, the absence of presence. Deep down, you know that love is not a battlefield of doubt or hide and seek. Love is honesty, connection, and soulful presence. Now is the time to step into that truth, to listen to what your heart whispers. Because those signals, those signs left by the unconscious shadow, are the key to your liberation. And with that, I invite you to reflect. What signs have you seen? What does your intuition tell you about your relationship, whether it's still alive or quietly dying? How much longer will you ignore those whispers? Your journey to clarity and empowerment begins at this very moment.